Happy Hanukkah, everyone! I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and tonight we are going to play with a variegated speckled colorway. Now, a lot of times when I go for speckles, I go for speckles, and I will lean in and speckle really heavily. In fact, there are some more videos like that coming up before the end of 2020. But tonight, I want to be a little more subtle and let the background colors I create really shine through and have the speckles support the other colorway I'm creating versus being the main focus. So let's go get started. Today we will revisit some colors that I explored in July 2020. And that was a combination for the ChemKnits dye-along that was primarily red and black with some hints of some tan and pale blue. Today I want to pump up the volume of the bright aqua and the sand dune and then have a little bit less red and potentially a little bit of black as well. So we're going to create a base that's going to be very random with the aqua and the sand dune spread out, low immersion, and then we will come in and speckle with cherry bomb and then evaluate if we also want to add some black speckles. For Hanukkah, the yarn base we are using is the Platinum line from Wool to Dye For. This yarn base is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and we are using it both in the fingering and DK weights. I pre-soaked the yarn in just some plain tap water overnight, and now we are ready to start dyeing. In this 4-inch deep catering steam pan that is dedicated for dyeing yarn, it's not a pan I use for any materials that would be used for preparing food. I have 6 cups of water and 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. And we are about to add 300 grams of yarn. I'm just sort of rotating the pan, lifting it up to stir up that vinegar. I removed a lot of the water from our 30 10-gram mini skeins here, but were still dripping when I brought them over. Now, some of this technique we are going to do is going to randomly add the blue and tan to this base before we speckle. And I'm debating, no, I think we'll do one side, the base, and then the speckles, and then we'll flip and do the other. But the thing that is a little different here is that if this was a full skein of yarn and I was adding like brown and blue and brown sort of in random patches, that would lead to some non-repeating random colorways. But since these are 10-gram minis and each mini is only this wide, there's a chance it could be non-repeating, but odds are that if I add blue here, there's going to be blue all the way across. So that is just worth pointing out that sometimes certain types of colorways that you create do end up feeling a little different on mini skeins than they might if you were dyeing 100 grams. And so there will be some minor differences in the patterning between the mini that is here and a mini over there. Not that I'm intentionally going for something asymmetric, but the goal is more random and non-repeating. When we are dealing with dry acid dye powders like today, I will be wearing a respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves whenever I am dealing with the dry dye powder. This deluxe rubber respirator that I use has P100 filters. I like it a lot. But in August 2020, it is harder to find some masks. This one is currently out of stock. I do have a blog post on my website that lists some other respirator mask recommendations I got from other indie dyers and places where you could locate them. So if you want to start playing with commercial dyes or any type of dye powders, I really recommend that you go and check out that blog post. To make small red speckles, we are going to use some citric acid powder. And we will be mixing the acid dye powder in with the citric acid. This helps both get really fine speckles, but also helps you spread it out a little further. In this cup, I have 2 teaspoons of citric acid powder, and I'm just coming in with the tip of my spoon right here, and I'm going to add this in and stir it up. to distribute the powder over the citric acid. And then we will use tiny pinches of this to speckle the yarn. And we'll create a similar container of black if necessary later on. Finally, while dealing with dry dye powder, I have some other skeins that I just briefly dunked into some water with some white vinegar, and I will be wiping my gloves on this during the dyeing process. Let's start with the Sand Dune, but actually, I'll reduce the heat to low to make it a little less steamy. The goal is to try to avoid introducing the goal is to attempt to avoid introducing moisture into our jar. And I'm coming down like that. I will wipe my hands right here on the yarn mop. And then I'm going to come and move this color through a little bit. Now we are going to get some speckles from the brown and the blue that we use on the base. But coming in with the spoon and moving it right now is going to help spread out this color. And I love the color from Sand Dune. Okay, rinsed and dried my gloves. Now I'm coming in with some bright Aqua, and it's okay if we layer this. I don't want these colors to be super deep, which is why I'm moving them fast. But you can see that there is a beautiful brightness to this bright aqua. This is not a color, ooh, that's so pretty. This is not a color that I use that often, but I really like it. We are definitely, it's striking pretty fast. We're getting some beautiful speckles in here. If I had more water in the pan, I would be able to get some of these colors to spread out a little bit more. And they will layer on top of each other a bit as we move the yarn and add more color to the other side. Because you can see we've got still that blank canvas over there. But this is just starting our base. Now we're going to come in with some little pinches of this red. I have no idea what I'm going to really think about this. I actually love just that Sand Dune and blue on their own. And I have no idea really if I'm going to want to add black to this or if I'm just going to enjoy these little bits of red here. And I'm trying really hard to only pick up a few granules at a time and letting them fall out slowly. We currently have enough water in here so that way the dye can really hit the yarn more than the water beneath it. And I'll zoom in a moment because I feel like you maybe can't even really see these speckles. But I actually really like this. Oh man, okay, I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more. We will end up with a fair amount of leftover red to use up. But I did wipe my spoon on our little yarn mop, but I'm coming in, just wiping off my glove on there. And now let me zoom you in. These red specks are so subtle. Tiny little speckles. If I added more citric acid powder, I would be able to spread them out even further. But I am happy with the density that we see here. There are a few spots where there's some spread, maybe we see some pink around, but in general, this feels like a blue and brown colorway, and it has these little pops of red. And I really like it. Part of me really wants to go in and add more red all over, but I am now having a debate about whether or not we need black. And I think because we have some dark speckles from the sand, some more deep brown speckles, I think I'm not going to come in with black. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. And now let's wait a good 5 minutes before we flip the yarn. Alright, these speckles should be pretty well set now. And in fact, if I pick it up, I'm not expecting to see much, if any, color move. And I'm trying to spread things out to expose as much of the white we have left as possible. Usually when I'm doing something like this, I'll end up needing to flip yarn maybe about 4 times. It seems to be a bit less with these mini skeins, but let's start going and do this other side. The biggest thing that is super important when doing a colorway like this is to have super dry hands when going in the powder. And if you want the colors that you spread to be more pastel, then use a really light hand on your powder application. Because if you go really heavy with the powder and don't spread it out, then you're going to have deeper patches when you finally go to spread it. But by having the powder spread out already, that's allowing us to wet it here and help distribute it through the yarn. And this is where we're going to start getting some overlap with the Sand Dune and the blue. I'm not trying to keep things exactly the way that they were before. It's more that I am aiming for some spread. And you will find, the more you play, that different powders speckle differently. And so different ones, some are really easy to come and, whoop, that was a bit of powder. Some are really easy to come and add. And then there are some others that just require a lot more effort to have them fall really well. And I'm wiping my hands off on the yarn mop before I come in with the spoon. And ooh, that had some green. That time I see some green in there. That is interesting. And so here's the spot. If you have too much, then you can just put in a little more effort to spread. But we're getting like speckles, and I'm not really sure what the inspiration is for this colorway. I just really wanted to play with these colors in a different way, and I really like the 3 of them together. I'm a little bit bummed about those green speckles, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. One other thing I really recommend, always put the lids back on your jars when you are not actively using them. And the reason why I recommend this is just so that way you do not risk, you don't want to risk accidentally knocking and spilling them and getting dye everywhere. I've really only had a massive spill of dye once, and thankfully that was on a protected countertop. So my biggest concern was just the amount of color that I was going to waste. And I was able to save a bunch of that dark navy color. But I'm taking a tiny amount each time, and slowly, you can almost, with the citric acid, feel the different granules, almost like salt. Like if you're putting salt on something and you just wanted a couple to fall out. I'm doing that. I'm sort of just rubbing my fingers together while moving it over the surface. And what's hard when you speckle like this is sometimes you can't see very well where the speckles are falling. And so you can go back over areas and just be really, really slow. What's funny is that originally when I was thinking this, I thought I was going to go heavier with these speckles, but I like using this red instead of black. I think that this colorway would be really cool with just black, but the red just brings something different to it. It's like, I don't know, strawberries or little berries or flowers or something, and it's just fun. And now we're going to wait another 5 minutes before we spend one other round with this. We're keeping the heat on low, and I'm not covering it, but you could cover it in between. That could be useful. All right, let's move this. Now we've dyed, oh, look at that bright green, funny. We've done one side, we've done the other, and now we need to open it up to do the inside. And we actually have some color coverage in here already, so that is good. But I think that in general, and we'll do a fourth flip, but to sort of move around and see if there's anywhere else that really needs exposing. But I think that we can make do here. Now, the water is warm. You can see I can comfortably touch it. I don't think I'd leave my hand in there, but do be careful when it comes to touching really hot water and things of that nature. So even though we've been adding some citric acid with our red, overall, we are not adding a ton of additional pigment here, a ton of additional acid in here with that, because we're adding overall so little red. And this time, I'm just adding in a few more spots. I'm just showing you our yarn mop is looking beautiful. Sand Dune is pretty dilute as far as dyes go. So I find that in terms of like mopping, it doesn't expand a lot, but it does give beautiful brown speckles, and I like using it for that. Just like sometimes I like to speckle with gray, even though you get black speckles, but having that color there can just be helpful. Okay. I really, really like this colorway. I don't know why I don't use bright aqua more. I really like it. Even if it breaks a little bit, probably because there's some differences of pigments in here. Now, when I'm saying breaking now, I'm meaning that we're seeing multiple hues, not just the pre-mixed one that we are speckling it with right here. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. One of the things you are getting when you are dealing with Dharma's pre-mixed colors are just that, pre-mixed colors, which means that you will have that variation in some of them because they're not just made by one pigment. And so depending on how they're mixed, that can make a difference. So you do want to make sure, if you can, that your bottles are well mixed, if that is a concern for you. But I really like where this is going. And the pops of green don't bother me a ton. If you have a Chanukah sampler and your skein from tonight has a pop of green, let us know down in the comments. I'm curious how many people will see that pop of green on their yarn. We are going to have a ton of leftover red speckles from today. Just from this red mixed with the citric acid. I'm trying hard to show similar restraint now that I have had the whole way. And each pinch that I pick up really isn't very much. And then I'm just rubbing my fingers together, really letting it fall out super slowly. As slow as I can. And then when I go back over this to add more, I'm paying attention to parts of the yarn that are definitely out of the water, and also trying to pay attention to the edges, because I want to get decent coverage, and sometimes some yarn over near the edge can get just a little left out. But this is looking pretty good. I am really happy. Okay, let's wait 5 more minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, let's flip this over. But I think, and I'm checking as I move it around. Okay, there is, I guess we've got a little bit of space here where I sort of want to add a bit more color. And this is why we pick things up and we move them around. And then you can see, like over there and maybe in here, if there are some places where we want a little bit more. I don't mind there being some white. Sometimes when I see white, I'm like, no, it must leave. But in this circumstance, it does not bother me. I got kitted back up to come in and add a bit more color in some of these places. Now, I want to add that when coming back in and adding color, even if you take breaks, put your mask back on. It could be really tempting to just leave the mask off or something, and you don't know when, you can't predict when like a spill or you could trip or something like that could happen. And so that's why your safety is really, really important. Like, I have been very fortunate when I check the outside of my mask, I don't see any color going in there, which is great. It means that the powder I'm adding to the yarn goes onto the yarn, it's not flinging back up. But if I were to trip, you don't want to then like have dye hit your face or something like that. And so that's why we take our safety stuff really, really seriously. And so just coming in with little bits, a little bit more random, and between the yarn mop. And the yarn mop is looking really cool. The thing with this level and this round is I no longer have like as good of a memory for where I added color first versus later on. So I'm just sort of quickly going through everywhere trying to move the color out and around. But you can see now how things felt so ordered at the beginning, and they are so much more chaotic now. And by chaotic, I mean beautiful, with the way that the colors are randomly distributed around here. Now this time I can see red in some places, and It doesn't need to be complete, massive coverage all over. It's okay if there are some gaps, but again, I am attempting to look for big areas near edges, to add our little speckles. Do-do-do. Oh man, I really like this. Okay. How about a little bit over there? I need to get a new pair of safety glasses because these have some scratches on them, which makes it harder for me to see through them. But again, safety is important. Let me bring the yarn mop back over. I do move it frequently, so that way I can rub my hands on different parts. But after I finish all of the yarn, I will go ahead and steam set this for probably 20 minutes. But I'm actually going to put some more minis on top of this to use for when I do the next 2 rounds. But I am calling this done. Well, almost. I turned the heat up more this time so we could get things nice and hot. But the reason why I said we're not quite done, I'm adding 1 liter of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And the big reason for doing this is to add a bit more acid and a bit more water. So that way things can move around a little bit and we can really heat this for things to set. So I'm going to turn the heat up to medium, and then we're going to let things kind of come up and then be at a very low simmer. I'll reduce the heat once we see bubbles and then be like that for 10 minutes. I'll turn off the heat, let it cool for a while here in the pan, just to give a little bit of time to make sure everything is nice and set. And you can see we're even seeing some movement quickly. You can sometimes even jack it up to hot for a little bit. Be careful about leaning over though, because if heat gets trapped underneath some yarn, sometimes you can get a little bit of a burst. And you can move the pan to help distribute the heat. I always forget about the fact that the heat is uneven here in these pans, because I've got a burner here and a burner here. So that's why sometimes I like to do hot for a little bit, because that actually spreads the heat a little further with the flame bigger. But we are good. So in 10 minutes, I'll turn off the heat. And then we do want to let the yarn cool completely before we wash it. Gloves on humid days are hard, just because they get wet and you have to replace them because it's harder to put them on and off. And the mask gets steamy, but it is worth it because this yarn is beautiful. These might be a little bit deeper than the original, but I am happy nevertheless. I'll probably check them each one more time, but we're just about ready to wash that first round that we dyed because the yarn is cool. And here is our second round of yarn mops ready to steam set. Don't worry, I have a plan for the rest of this red dye that video might already be out. Let's wash this yarn. Oh, I had a lot of fun creating this colorway. I don't often do an accent speckle color in something that isn't neutral. So it would have been very expected for me to use navy or brown speckles on here. But the red is really, really fun. And this project also has me thinking about how many different types of colorways you can create using the same 3 or 4 colors. Now, I did not use black in here today, but even if I had, there are aspects of this that would work really, really well with the yarn I created when we were inspired by the alarm clock. So I think that I am going to have a challenge for myself, but I am not seeing any bleeding here. I am going to rinse out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll be back with some conclusions. There are definitely some differences between the batches. I think this is one of the sets from the first batch I did, and you can see I had a lot lighter hand on here with our blue and that sand color. And then in one of the other pans, I went a bit heavier. But I still think both of them are really, really beautiful. The sand definitely is reading more gray to me than brown. Maybe the more I look at it, I see more of that tan sandy color, but I think that the coolness of that blue also makes it feel a little bit more like gray when it really is brown, I promise. The pops of red are so fun, and they really do actually read a little bit more pink than red to me, which I don't know why that always surprises me. I mean, after I did that ChemKnits dye-along, the cherry bomb felt more pink than red to me, but yeah, and in here as well, it is feeling a little more pink than red, but I like it. I think that it is not the obvious choice that I normally would make, and it makes me really, really happy. When you're zoomed out, those little pops of red don't make as much of an impact as they do when you take a closer look. Before I go and I twist these colorways up, I wanted to show off our yarn mops that I used along the way to wipe my fingers. And there was a lot of cherry bomb mixed with citric acid left over. I did use that in a Leave No Dye Behind video that will be up in not too long. But the red in this really, really pops more and really makes this feel like a different colorway, and it has such a different feel because that red has much more of an impact in here than it does in the very light speckles. And so again, I'm thinking about that dye-along and just wanting to challenge myself by picking a very limited number of colors and then designing multiple colorways around that. And really challenging myself more with the technique selection than the colors. Twisted up, there is a softness to our main colorway here. A softness that isn't echoed as much in our Leave No Dye Behind bonus skeins, maybe because there's more white, the colors are a little bit more patchy. The colorway, even though the total depth of the colors is very similar, will be a little more wild variegated than the softness here. But I really like both colorways. This Leave No Dye Behind way of wiping my fingers on skeins is absolutely a favorite, whether it is on minis or full skeins. I'm so happy here. Would you guys, thinking back, would you guys have added the black speckles, or would you have left it here with just the red? I have a feeling if I had gone and added the black, I would have kept going and adding more and more and more. So whenever I sort of restrain myself, I end up pleasantly surprised with a really, really gorgeous colorway. I have a lot more minis to go and twist up, but as for those little pops of green that we saw, I maybe saw a hint here or there, but untwisting up the skeins, there really wasn't much for me to go and point to. So if you saw a little pop of green in your yarn, oh wait, here's one. Here's a little, and when I left off camera, here's a little pop of green in one skein. But anyway, if there was a pop of green in the set that you opened up, please let me know down in the comments. I'm curious how many people saw some green in their mini. I am so excited with this colorway and how subtle the speckles are, and that they're not black, they're not a neutral. I really want to play around more with really lightly applying speckles. This is honestly something I struggle with because when I'm dyeing, say, 100-gram skeins of yarn, I tend to want to make sure I have really good coverage of a color. And so that means I'm like, okay, I need to have it every round, which you really don't. But it means that lightly applying speckles without the yarn, worrying about the yarn feeling unbalanced, is something that I struggle with and clearly should play with more because I love the results. This is a good opportunity, however, to talk about techniques and what you love. Different dyers have different techniques that they feel that they're good at, some that they feel that they're not very good at, but you really don't have to be good at everything. Many dyers have a signature technique or type of color that they like to play with, something that really defines them. I don't feel like I necessarily have that for myself. There's certainly some things I create that I'm like, this is me. And I think that if I were to just have a shop, that I would lean in and focus on some of those techniques. But I love playing around with a little bit of everything. And so I think that you don't need to feel like you need to master every technique. But if there's a technique that you enjoy, it's fun to push yourself out of your typical comfort zone, whether that is color or intensity and heaviness of hand. And so challenging yourself with some of these little differences can really help you grow as a dyer. And I know it helps me grow. And so each time I do one of these Chanukah series and I'm working on it, I learn so much and I have so much inspiration from creating this collection of videos that really shapes where I go over the next year. So please make sure that you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. In addition to the Chanukah special, I publish videos every Tuesday and Friday mornings, and you can press that bell icon to turn on notifications so YouTube can let you know when I release new videos. If you'd like to watch the entire 2020 ChemKnits Chanukah collection, you can find a playlist on my channel, and I'll also link to it down in the video description. If you love the yarn I dye, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. It's filled with yarn dyed in my videos, and if you look closely, you can even get some sneak peeks of things that are coming up along the way, because sometimes things end up in the shop before the videos have been published. It's also a really great way to help support the content here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, and so thank you so much for all of your support. Now tomorrow, we are going to be dyeing more yarn, so I will see you after sundown. And I cannot wait for you to see what we create on Chanukah night 4. Thank you so much for watching.